museums of the Smithsonian Institution on the National Mall in Washington are monuments to our American heritage, to the creations of nature and of man. Not far away from the mall itself stands another Smithsonian building. For many years, the home of the U.S. Patent Office, it was a repository for the brilliant and sometimes bizarre creations of American inventors. Today, this magnificent Greek Revival structure finds new life as the National Museum of American Art. Known formerly as the National Collection of Fine Arts, the museum exhibits works by such widely recognized artists as Gilbert Stuart, Winslow Homer, Mary Cassatt, the nation's largest collection of Albert Pinkham Ryder, and over 400 paintings by George Catlin, whose years of living among American Indians produced a collection of historic as well as artistic value.
You say red, yellow, and blue, but do they look like red?
But this is not a museum of the predictable. It's a place where the visitor is set free to discover, to explore, and to savor. Everything here encourages visitors not only to look, but to see, to find new perspectives about art and maybe even about themselves. As Dr. Joshua C. Taylor, director of the National Museum of American Art, has said, it is only from a thoughtful, personal encounter that the experience of art has meaning.
Go off in the front. And we're going to go in and out and squiggle all the way through purple.
The spirit and character of the museum are rooted in the works in the collection. But each exhibit and gallery represent the cumulative effort and trained judgment of a professional staff of more than 120. Curators, administrators, educators, conservators, and designers.
Somewhere between 60 and 80 works covering the beginnings of American art to the present.
All under the guidance of the director, Dr. Taylor.
All of the problems of putting it together. We had a meeting yesterday.
Collectively, the staff members share a commitment to the museum visitor and to the art in their care. They strive to exhibit every artwork, sculpture, painting, print, or drawing, as effectively as possible, and to enable the viewer to see relationships among the works of art. Is one of 65 volunteer docents or tour guides.
You know, this is interesting.
These docents find that looking at the art together often leads to expanded insights.
Have you used it recently? No. You mean right off, Helen? You think that...
Working with Nora Panzer of the Education Department, they seek new ways to bring the viewer closer to the art.
So much violent kind of energy.
They are not lecturers, but catalysts. They encourage visitors to form and trust their own responses.
You know, how it relates to the others. Why was it home here? There is a tremendous contrast.
For most of us, what we know of a museum is what we see in the galleries. But the hanging of a painting or the placement of a sculpture is the culmination of a long process. At the heart of that process is research, and the museum's resources for the scholar are unsurpassed. The library has greatly increased its holdings in recent years, broadening its usefulness both for the staff and for visiting researchers. It houses the Archives of American Art, a separate branch of the Smithsonian, with its huge collection of artists' personal papers, photographs, and sketchbooks. The library, like the building itself, is shared by the National Portrait Gallery. The collections themselves are among the museum's most important study resources. Thousands of works, in storage as well as on display, represent the myriad aspects of this nation's art.
You know, the techniques.
Studying the collections, a researcher may be able to read not just the history of our art, but of our progress.
I'm saying if you want to do it right.
Well,
whether it's
from the spelling, it looks it's founders rather than fondeurs, so it's probably an American foundry rather than a French one.
Michel Shapiro is a pre-doctoral fellow studying the origins of bronze casting in America. Working within the museum, he gains from regular contact with other fellows and staff members, such as George Gurney, a former fellow and guest curator, and Linda Hartigan, assistant curator of 20th century art.
This one with the distinctive marking where he labels it with the method of casting. I've never seen that. Where else would you see a bas-relief labeled Cire Perdue? And this is from a collection.
With former fellows now working in museums and educational institutions around the country, the fellowship program helps to strengthen ties between the museum and academic worlds.
Here you can see a connection between his paintings and his later sculpture. And you can see the same kind of inflated, smooth, tubular forms in both the sculpture and his drawings.
Scholarship and research are, in a sense, the cornerstones, the first step in the creation of an exhibition or publication.
This is where he's painting.
The actual one, that's actually...
Roberta Tarbell, a former fellow at the National Museum, and Mary Foresta, assistant curator of 20th century art, are planning a publication to accompany an exhibition on Hugo Robes, an American artist known primarily as a sculptor.
Well, the interplay between the pictorial and the sculptural works is always fascinating.
Roberta Tarbell's research uncovered previously unknown paintings and drawings by Robes. In the show, they will add a dimension which the sculptures alone could not provide.
I feel it should go in right when you talk about the piece. There's no other place in the text where you simply talk about
Well, I
technique.
talk about his technique more.
Producing a major publication for almost every exhibition, the National Museum shares its newest findings with students and scholars around the country, as well as with visitors to the galleries.
Actually, well, this is a very interesting working photograph.
Okay, I have that one listed also.
The hands of skilled artisans, guided by scientific and artistic expertise, are charged with the physical preservation and well-being of art objects in the collection. Damage can usually be repaired and deterioration halted. Often, the removal of dirt or discolored layers can restore not just the work, but the reputation of an artist as well.
Well, just think for a moment what would happen if you took a frame off this.
An internship program brings college students into the museum.
Well, his style changed a lot, too, over the
They're
years.
here for a semester of first-hand exposure to the intricacies of operating a museum.
You know, this is a different way of seeing art. For example, this painter who's
With
pretty
Dr.
wonderful.
Taylor, they get an inside perspective and begin to understand how his commitment to scholarship leads to fresh and revealing museum experiences.
It's a wonderful painting, isn't it? Usually you think that this is the kind of painting you get back from and sort of squint at because it's sort of vague. You're always taught that, you know, an impressionist painting, you get back and you squint.
In a way, I have a feeling I want to sort of get lost in that.
It's an invitation to get lost. You lose interest in Niagara Falls or factories and what have you, and eventually you're just all wound up in the painting itself, which is a very modern idea, very 20th century, that you recreate the work as you look at it. You know, there's a great virtue, I think, of having a gallery in which you do have all landscape, and yet every single one is totally different. Everyone makes you think differently, feel differently, you get into it differently. That you then become the artist, you and the artist join together to recognize this strong human feeling. Nature is the catalyst, nature is what brings that feeling about. But nonetheless, it's you that has the spiritual content. our biggest space and our most wonderful space.
The Lincoln Gallery was the scene of festivities for Abraham Lincoln's second inauguration in 1865. Today, it houses works from all periods in the nation's history.
What we're trying to do is keep the sense of the total space at the same time, create areas in which you can concentrate on a few paintings or a few works of art at once. For example, here, in this little area, you're surrounded by the works of an extraordinary black artist named W.H. Johnson. They were in incredibly bad condition because they were painted on absolutely anything he could get his hands on, and our conservation department worked for a long while to get the basic group of them in shape. And out of this dirt and grime came the most gorgeous array of paintings in extraordinary colors. And so we did an exhibition and published the work on him a few years ago. And so now we have well over 1,200 works by him, which is a great record of an artist. We like this, the idea that we have in the collection not just a work, but we have the group of works, so we have the personality of the artist. For example, when we collect the works of an artist, we often like to collect his student drawings. We like to collect things that would have no market value, but have a great value in understanding how he thought. And so we have various collections of that kind. Mr. Sion was another one of those extraordinary painters who somehow didn't fit. You won't find him listed in any of the usual books on American art or the dictionaries any more than you'll find Johnson. But he was an amazing man. What we do with such painters is not just show them. We published a book on him. We've also given some works to other museums across the country. And we hope, little by little, that maybe the history of American art will be rewritten with all of these wonderful people who somehow got left out. At a very early point, there was a tremendous interest in just plain recording everything people could see. And, well, look, record. But is it art?
Sure.
Well,
it looks more like art than nature.
But it looks like nature, doesn't it?
Well, it looks like nature, but it looks like idealized nature.
We're not used to looking at paintings like this anymore because we go back and try to focus them all. But, of course, he means it as a journey you wander through as you look at it. But, you know, here it serves as a kind of introduction also to the West. We can go backwards. When you start looking around, you'll find that all other aspects of the American continent turn up. This is a museum that we consider a museum of record. It's a record of art, meaning, of course, the whole taste in art as well as what the artists themselves did in America. So we can trace then the collecting taste in America as well as the production of the artist.
In the 19th century, American collectors favored European art, acquiring only occasional works by American artists. Recognizing the origins of all Western art, the museum continues to exhibit some European works from its early holdings, as a reminder of the related development of Old and New World artists. Impressionism, for example, existed on both sides of the Atlantic. The American version is clearly and simply different. At the National Museum, visitors see the smaller pleasures. The unknown or forgotten, as well as prominent American artists. Collecting contemporary art challenges the professional judgment of today's curators. As in any age, the artist's perceptions sometimes exceed our ability to grasp them. By collecting works of the present, the museum is creating a record of our times, which will enable future generations to make their own assessment. And often, contemporary art can shed new light on works of the past, just as the past can illuminate the present. Building on its substantial nucleus of American art, the National Museum has focused its recent expansion solely on the arts of the United States. More than 1,000 works are added to the collection each year. A major thrust of the acquisitions effort is in the area of prints, drawings, and watercolors. Gathering a broad range of these works, the museum is rapidly filling in the gaps, providing a complete survey of American prints and drawings.
Now totaling more than 13,000, these works form a rich resource for rotating public exhibitions and for scholars and students as well.
I think it's very fun, actually. Let me just look at that.
Oh, there's...
Did you see her?
I know.
Oh, that's Petterday, and that's who we had.
High school students come into the museum for the Discover Graphics program, an exciting extension of their classroom studies.
Prints where he cuts the plate and down.
With the help of Teresa Grana of the Education Department, they are introduced to a valuable source of study and inspiration.
It's a great way of the way he's used the sky.
The students have been working with high school teachers who have been part of the museum's Teachers in Residence program. In the workshop, they find the means to express their ideas.
The roller almost fits the whole plate anyhow, so up there you're not going to really notice because anyway you have that sort of wide cross-hatching, but do your last roll vertically.
Moving through each step of the printmaking process, they test and develop their skills with guidance from artist-in-residence Alan Kaneshiro. Alan and his assistant, Georgia Deal, also an artist, act as teachers, helpers, critics, and supporters.
Okay, well this is going well because now, did you not draw into this area at all?
It's real impressive how talented some of them are.
They want to make it. They're ready to absorb stuff. They can absorb it very quickly. And when they come into an adult world like this museum, it turns that on. They want to become it. They want to become, an adult.
This is, a heyday for them. They feel real prestigious. And there is a lot of competition, amongst the students who gets to go this year.
They're down here to just do their own thing, to make a print, good or bad, we don't care. And if they want to become an artist after that, that's fine.
A lot of them will leave in the middle of their work and go upstairs, wander around, look at stuff. They'll want to drag you down the hall. I want to do something like this. How is this done?
How many high school students would really come to the museum by themselves? I think a lot of high school students want to be in a museum but have no excuse to be there. The Discover Graphics gives them an excuse to be there with a bunch of friends, classmates, and therefore they feel more secure and gives them an excuse to return again and again.
When each student completes the program, 2 prints go to the museum, becoming a permanent part of the high school graphics collection. And many will have their work shown in a biennial exhibition.
Early on a Saturday morning, the museum staff and volunteers are putting together a special celebration, an annual festival day.
And circle to the left. Circle to the left like a great big wheel. The more you dance, the better you feel. Now the other way back on the same old track.
The day is designed especially for families, and visitors pass freely between the museum itself and the activities in the courtyard. It's an invitation to experiment with the ideas and materials of art.
Each year there's a special theme, and today it's a Western motif, inspired by a visiting exhibition of contemporary Western art. The Western
Western exhibition came to the museum after a first showing in Denver. Organized by the Western States Arts Foundation, the show includes works by artists from 13 states. Preparation for the exhibit began more than a year ago and has involved virtually every department in the museum. Now, art handlers install the objects according to a plan devised by the museum's chief designer, Val Luton. A designer's job is a balancing act in which a sense of composition and spatial relationships join with a knowledge of art and art history. His obligation is to show each work to its best advantage and still achieve an integrated effect.
What happens with the cow is that we can do it by hand, but after a while, see, it's so high that you're doing it with your fingertips. You don't have, you can't hardly...
Luis Jimenez Jr. is a New Mexico artist who interprets traditional Western images in fiberglass and epoxy.
Just cheat this way along.
The show includes 3 of his sculptures, whose size and audacity make them focal points of the exhibition.
This wall was made asymmetrical with this one so that...
Harry Rand, curator of 20th century art, has been involved from the very beginning, and in fact served on the panel that selected the works for the show. The curator carries the chief responsibility for an exhibition. His intentions are reflected in the designer's work, in the choice of art objects, in the publication. He also ensures that the exhibition as a whole makes a unified statement.
Let's get this piece up before we decide what to do.
Oh, now this is easy, okay? I think that's about it. Now let's pull the back blanket out. Okay, stop. Come back down. Or come this way with it. Forward, this way. That means that instead of this view, you'll have this view.
This view.
Okay, you'll have the cow
going that way.
Coming this way, and you'll have the horseman coming down.
How does that seem to you?
Oh, you want to have this view?
Not necessarily.
Having an artist present while his work is being installed is not unusual here.
But you would see the rope stretch.
The result is a special kind of collaboration.
How does that feel to you? Would that be all right?
Well, that's all, it's whatever you want.
I think that's going to be better.
When the show's organizers approached Dr. Taylor, he immediately offered to support the exhibition with a showing. It would advance one of the National Museum's major objectives, to provide exposure for contemporary artists little known outside their own regions. Luis Jimenez has worked in New York, but returned to the Southwest, the source of his images.
This show, it's really important for all of us artists in the West, because this is a national museum, and it should show what the entire country is doing, not just what New York is doing. Art isn't just for artists. I mean, ideally, art was an important part of a community. If art has a function at all, it's to give people some insight into what they're all about.
Let's just try to move the base around. That's going pretty good. Okay, you're going to have to guide us. Okay, it's got to go that way for sure. Okay, keep going. Okay, that needs to go straight in. Go ahead.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, we got it. Okay. All right, now. Okay, whoa. Is that under the lip? Yeah. Okay. Okay. When they see it, they can normally do that anyway.
They can do it. You can make it so that
How are you doing, right?
We're doing very well.
Well, we got some problems.
Yeah, what
Whether this piece should move back this way, whether the piece should just occupy the space in there.
You might even want to move it just a little bit more than that, but at least a foot left. So what you would see is this image, and then when you come around here, you pick up the other.
National Museum of American Art presents more than 25 special exhibitions every year. Each one is the tangible result of an unseen process, the interweaving of the functions, responsibilities, and talents of the people within each department of the museum. Together, they bring to a growing audience of visitors and scholars the rich abundance of the art of the United States.
Perhaps the spirit that drives the museum has been best expressed by Dr. Taylor. If there is a central character to American art, it is that it has come to mean more and different things to an ever-expanding public. America's individual artists have contributed much, both to their own society and to the worldwide range of artistic experience. They have provided a wealth of insights by which America, for all its diversity, might better know itself.